Okay, you finally made it. In this very last episode of CSS Noob to Ninja, we're going to show how we can seemingly extend CSS to allow for a lot of the things that people feel it's lacking. For example, what about using variables in your CSS? It's actually possible not with native CSS, but by using something called less, or you might have heard Sass. We can do a lot of neat things like adding variables, calling functions that'll keep us from having to write the same, especially with CSS3 that we learned having to write the same moves border radius, WebKit border radius, border radius, having to do that so many times. So we're going to take a look at that, and I'm also going to show you kind of a cool trick of how to keep your browser refreshed. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, let's drag this out, and I have a blank page. Let's save that, refresh. And if we go into TextMate, I'll go ahead and hide the project drawer. We need to reference LESSjs. So if you have never heard of this, don't worry, it's relatively new. We need to go ahead and add a new file. And the way that we can work with variables and functions in our CSS is to create a style sheet with an extension of less, not CSS. So I'll create that. Okay. And now within our project, let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to go ahead and do HTML5. And we need to first reference our style sheet. So we'll do that right now. Link rel. And rather than doing style sheet, we need to do style sheet /less. Okay. And then of course the href needs to be just, as always, a path to the style sheet. Okay, that's not going to do it just yet. We need to import the logic. So we're going to import that style sheet, or I'm sorry, the LESSjs. Okay, so you can see it's stored on Google Code, so you can grab this and reference it as well. And let's save that. So now, here's the really cool thing we can do here. As I told you, let's try a variable. So we create a variable name by doing the @ symbol and then variable name. Okay, so if I wanted to say primary color. Okay, and we're going to call that red. Now, rather than having to repeat the same primary color of your website throughout every style sheet, you could just reference this one variable. So, for the sake of simplicity, let's do it right here. Background color is going to be primary color. If I come back here and refresh the page, now it's turned red. So you may not immediately see the value in this, but especially when you have multiple layers, you'll need to, all you have to do is change one value here and it'll update every single property. It's really cool, right? Okay, before we go any further, I want to show you one really cool feature that a lot of people don't know about LESSjs, is it has a watch feature. So what the watch feature does is it listens for any time there is a change to this style.less file. And when there is, it'll go to the browser and tell it to refresh. But it won't actually refresh. It'll refresh without adding a new page load. So it'll simply update all of the CSS in your browser. Pretty cool. So the way you can do that is just anywhere. I'll put it at the bottom. Within script tags, we're simply going to instruct less to watch it. So we call less.environment, and this is for development only. Of course, you would remove this before you deploy your project. And then we call less.watch. So as soon as I save that and I'll refresh my browser, watch what happens. Let me go ahead and get rid of the hide project drawer. And if I change it to yellow, you're going to see it change as soon as I save. Pretty neat. Think how much time that can save you when you don't keep having to go back here, press refresh, observe the changes, and then tab back. So always do that, but make sure you remove it before you're finished with your project. Okay, let's return here and look at some of the other cool things we can do. It has a feature called mixins. So mixins allow us, just think of them as functions. If you've ever used a server-side language or even JavaScript, functions allow us to abstract away bits of code. So in this case, you learned how to create rounded corners by doing mouse border radius is 3 pixels, and then we could copy that and do the same thing for WebKit. And then finally, we would want to do the official version, which will only be border radius. Okay. So if you're like me, you found yourself copying this exact same code all across your style sheet. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just set a mix-in? Okay. And we can do that. So we'll call it, give it a class of rounded, and the way we can designate it as a mix-in is like this. Okay? So now, as soon as you call this method from any property, this is going to run. So now let's go ahead and add div ID equals container. I go back to style sheet. Let's go ahead and style that really quickly. Width of 200, height of 200 pixels, and background of gray. So if I want to call this method, all I need to do here is call rounded. So watch what happens. Save my project. And now you can see that it's rounded. So we can even take this further and add a little more flexibility. What if we want to be able to pass in how round it should be? That would be nice, right? Okay, we can add a variable up here, and as I showed, we create variables by using the @ symbol. So if I say @radius, colon, it won't be equals, you'll do colon, and we can set a default radius of 3 pixels. Then all we have to do is update this accordingly. Okay, so now when we call rounded, I can pass in 10 pixels, and you can see that's been updated. So if I change that to 1, now it's gotten shorter. If I change that to something really high, it updates accordingly. So you can imagine using this for a lot of things. Maybe if you want to set specific fonts, if you want to apply a specific shadow, especially for CSS3 stuff, you can abstract a lot of it away to these methods. So if we want to move over to Firefox, I'll show you something really quickly. If I open up Firebug, and I'll bring this down, and if we view the source, you can see that all these functions are doing, it's not doing anything specific. All it does is it applies to styling here, and it gets applied to container, as you can see right there. So if you want, you probably don't want to make your project rely on JavaScript. So if you keep LESSjs when you deploy your project, it will depend on JavaScript in order to run correctly. So what you would probably want to do is right before you deploy your project, you would take all the styling here, copy it out, and then create a new style.css file. Okay. Let's take a look at a couple more things that you can do here. You can do nested selectors. So if I had another one here, let's say P, hello world. Let's go back to Safari. Okay. I can then, if I want to target that P, I can either do container P, something like that, or I can nest it and save myself a bit of writing. So I can put it within here, and I can do P, color green, and now you're going to see that's updated here. And let's go ahead and change that to 2 pixels. So what's going on here is this paragraph tag is receiving the selector of container. So first, it's the equivalent of doing container P. Okay, and inherits that selector, and it cleans up your code. You don't have to repeat yourself as often. If you wanted to do another one, you could do container, I don't know, if there's an H1 tag somewhere in the container, you could do that as well. And this is a nice way to keep your code as clean as possible. Okay, so that's the extent. I don't want to go too far because this is a CSS series, but this is something you definitely want to consider. Just make sure before you deploy, you go ahead and get the styling, copy it out, create a new style.css file, and then you reference that instead of .less. But for development, this will save you massive amounts of time. And as always, if you want to watch, make sure you add less.environment equals development, less.watch, and then it'll update really quickly. There you go. Okay, and this has been the entire series, so I really appreciate you guys for sticking around. If you watched the whole series, give yourself a pat on the back, and thanks so much for watching.